The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons. I now see it, hear it, receive it, and uphold it. I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings, let's generate the supreme bodhicitta. Now let us continue with our class on the Mahayana Surangama Sutra. Now, you may be quite aware that this is a very well-known sutra in the mainland area, and many people, by relying on this sutra, had attained realization. Not only the teaching has a rich content, it has great blessings of pith instructions as well. So many great masters and noble ones had attained supreme realization by relying on this teaching and gone to pure place. This is such a supreme teaching. But because of the merit and the connection to this teaching is very different for sentient beings, therefore in certain regions and places the sutra is not that well known. For example, in Tibet, recently some Khenpos who are quite prolific and very well versed, especially in our monastery, our institute, and they asked me what I've been teaching on, and I said the wish fulfilling treasury, and he said that's great. And then what else? I said, well, 37 stanzas of Bodhisattva, the practice of Bodhisattva. They said, oh, that's great. And then I said, also, I'm giving teachings on Surangama Sutra. He said, well, what is it in Tibetan? And then I told him the title. Also, then he asked me, well, I never heard of that. Is it a part of the Tripitaka? Is it part of the Hinayana teaching or the Mahayana teaching? I've never heard of this title. So we can see that sometimes the sutras of the Buddha may not be that well known in certain regions. But as we've discussed before, the Surangama Sutra is included in the Digger Tripitaka, only 2 chapters of it. Later on, Chakya Dorje and his translation team translated the entire sutra about 200 years ago. And when we discussed about the history and the preface composed by the Emperor Qianlong, we also talked about a few people who made great contributions, such as there's Prince Zhuang and as well as his translation team and the Changkya Rinpoche Dorje, when they began the translation, it was back in 1752. It took them 11 years to translate the sutra. They translated the sutra from the Chinese language into Manchurian, into Mongolian, into Tibetan language.
那到现在的话呢，就是应该有这么长的时间吧，就是200多年的时间。
Ever since that translation, it's been 12 years. It's been 200 years. It took them 11 years to translate, and ever since then, it's been 200 years. But within these 200 years, the sutra is not well propagated. So, not very well known in the monasteries, in any of the institutes, or within the local people. Within the local people, usually in Tibet, they pay great attention to the few sutras, including the Good Kalpa Sutra and then the Golden Light Sutra, as well as the 8,000 verses of Prajnaparamita. Those are really well known. Of course, the people may not really understand the content of the sutra, but they believe to have those sutras at home would protect them so that everything would go smoothly and it will protect their family to prosper, so on and so forth. All of those worldly intentions. But Surangama Sutra, it is not very well known in Tibet. I'm not sure if there would be more people to propagate it, especially in Tibetan language. I can't really, I don't really have a certainty of that. After the translation of Chankar Rinpoche Dorje and the Emperor Qianlong in Qing Dynasty, from all different angles, they had lots of fame and they're very well known. They had lots of power. But after the translation, why didn't they give the teachings? I have not heard anything about giving teachings on it. I heard that after it's been translated into Mongolian and Manchurian, there were people who give teachings on the Surangama Sutra, but not sure how well it went. I heard that under the guidance of Prince Zhuang, there was a teacher whose name is Master Tong Li, and he read the commentary of Right Lineage composed by Master Jiao Guang and felt that there was such certain content within it that's not very well explained, and later on he spent 20 years to compose his own commentary, the commentary of finger and palm. And that particular commentary is very well known during the Qing Dynasty. He particularly stated that the fingers and palm commentary take this title because this book has the intention to clarify the teachings of Surangama Sutra, just as how one would hold a mango fruit in one's palm. There are different names to those commentaries as well. Just as in Tibet, we also have various names, various titles to different commentaries. Master Tong Li spent 20 years on the commentary on the Lotus Sutra, and then later he used over 20 years to compose the commentary of Surangama Sutra. So these two fingers and palms commentary are the two extremely important commentaries in his life. And these two books are quite well known in mainland, and the teachings are given extensively in mainland China. So we can say that the Chinese language teaching on the Surangama Sutra is quite successful. I'm not quite sure about Manchurian and Mongolian. We used to have lots of Mongolian here. They speak very differently, but I'm not sure if we still have lots of Mongolians here. And I'm not sure if the Surangama Sutra is very well known or popular in the Mongolian culture. The Surangama Sutra has been translated into the English language as well, but I'm not sure if they're as popular as the ones that's propagated in the Chinese language. Not sure how many people are giving the teachings of Surangama Sutra nowadays. The great masters or monks, I'm sure there are qualified teachers to give teachings in various monasteries and institutes. And I'm sure lots of our practitioners over here are very good at giving teachings on lots of the sutras, such as Lotus Sutra, such as Vimalakirti Sutra, such as the Surangama Sutra as well. And last time when we studied the Vimalakirti Sutra, I'm sure many of you spent lots of time and majority of you studied it all the way from the beginning till the end. That was really wonderful. I'm not sure how long the Surangama Sutra will take us to study, but hopefully we will finish it well as well. But I'm not sure if there will be many people who want to listen to the Surangama Sutra. Nowadays, I think there is a problem. People tend to prefer to engage in more tourism in monasteries rather than studies in monasteries. But of course, there are meditation centers where they're not open to tourism. They're just pure practice centers. Nowadays, we have lots of young people who has lots of wisdom, and I'm not sure if there are a great numbers of young people who have that much of compassion, that much wisdom to give teachings. But till now, we in our institute indeed had cultivated a great numbers of talents. Not sure how much contribution they can make to Buddhism, but this kind of offering to the sentient beings is quite crucial. I remember that Ponzo Rinpoche, when he was alive, I think I told you the story, when Ponzo Rinpoche returned to Larongar in order to avoid high altitude sickness, we had to travel a longer route. At that time, we stayed at this hotel that looks almost like a monastery. When we entered, that's when we realized it's a hotel. And this hotel was owned by a Tibetan the Tibetan owner said that initially I invested 1 million RMB and then got a loan from the government for 2 million. My initial aspiration is to build a good hotel for the Tibetans, though that the business is not good. And then I thought to myself, well, if the business is not good, what really are you living for? Are you offering to the Tibetans? Because as a businessman, it is important to have good business. If the business is not good, how could it be beneficial for the Tibetans or for anyone? So similarly, over here in our institute, we indeed had nurtured and had cultivated lots of talents, but I'm not sure how much contribution all of these talents can contribute to Buddhism. That Tibetan owner, I feel that I'm just like that Tibetan owner, though I have a great aspiration, but not sure how much contribution I can make. Anyhow, we have a very good oral transmission for the Vimalakirti Sutra as well as the Lotus Sutra. And the oral transmission is indeed very rare. Whenever you have an opportunity, I hope that you can propagate the teaching well. Let it be in monastery or in any of the centers. It's quite essential to propagate the teachings. 3 years ago, when we started to give the teachings on the Surangama Sutra, I said that even at the beginning of propagating the teaching of Surangama, it was very difficult. Master Chi, for example, when he learned about the certain contents from the Surangama Sutra from an Indian monk, he really wanted to receive the teaching teachings of Surangama Sutra. He really wanted to study it. And then he prostrated at this platform, which is called the platform of prostration, for 18 years, hoping that the sutra can be propagated and can be brought to China. But even at the time of entering into parinirvana, at the time of his parinirvana, that wish was not fulfilled. Later, it was only when Paramita traveled and brought the teachings through transcribing the sutra onto a very thin layer of lambskin or a very thin layer of some kind of animal skin, and then rolled it up, cut his arm open, and then hid that roll of sutra teaching in his flesh. That's how he carried the teaching to China. After hiding the teaching in his flesh, he then traveled all the way to China, and then he entered China from Guangzhou, the southern part of China. When he cut open his arm and took out the scrolls, it was intact. I think it was back in 705 or 713 CE. Around that time, it was Tang Dynasty during the reign of Empress Wu. She valued Buddhism a lot. But I remember that the Surangama Sutra didn't really have lots of commentary composed during Tang Dynasty. It was after that, during Song, Ming, and Qing Dynasty, more and more great masters started to give teachings on the Surangama Sutra. And the Surangama Sutra started to get very prosperous in mainland China. According to Master Han Shan, he said that not reading the Surangama Sutra, one does not know the key of practicing the mind and dispel the confusion. If one were not to read into the teaching of Lotus Sutra, one would not be able to generate the mind of saving the world with great compassion. If one do not read the Avatamsaka Sutra, then one would not be able to understand the richness of the Buddhism teaching. So if we do not read the Surangama Sutra, then we would not be able to understand our practice. We won't be able to differentiate confusion from insights in our practice. If we do not study the Lotus Sutra, then we will not be able to understand the great compassion of the Buddha. If we do not study the Avatamsaka Sutra, then we will not be able to see the great description of the richness of the Buddhism cosmos. The richness refers to the limitless and infinite view of the cosmos. So these three sutras are really important sutras. Now we've already studied Lotus Sutra, and we started to study the Surangama Sutra. Yesterday, someone asked me, hey, could you please give us teachings on the Avatamsaka Sutra as well? Well, it's not that easy. Yesterday, someone ran to me and said, could you please give us teachings on the Avatamsaka Sutra? The Avatamsaka Sutra is really not that easy. Now let's continue with the Surangama Sutra. Today we started to get into the next part, which is seeing is not obstructed. Ananda over here said to the Buddha, world-honored one, given that the seeing nature is certainly mine and does not belong to anything else, when the thus come one and I regard the palaces of the four heavenly kings with its supreme store of jewels and stay at the palace of sun and moon, this seeing completely pervades the land of Saha world. So over here, Ananda addressed the Buddha saying that, "O world modern one, I know this seeing is not something external. It is certainly mine and does not belong to anything else. It is not something that is existent on the external world." But when I went to the four heavenly kings' palace with the Thus Come One, with its supreme stores of jewels, the palaces that's full of the store of jewels, when we went there, at that time, we also saw the palace of sun and moon. Some of the commentary said that the palace of moon is as large as 50 yojanas. The palace of sun is as large as 50 yojanas, and the palace of moon is as large as 49 yojanas. According to a sutra, it's called the Rising of World Sutra. It has the different descriptions of the different types of wind. For example, holding the wind will not let the world fall. Holding the wind or going along with the wind will tame the world. Also, upholding the wind as well as practicing the wind. There are the 5 types of wind that it talks about. The particular names are different than the names that's used in the wish-fulfilling treasury, but the function of those winds seems to be very similar. Anyhow, Ananda at that time asked that we've already went to the 4 great heavenly kings and already seen the world over there, also saw that the surroundings of the 4 heavenly kings' palace. On top of that, we've seen the Jambudvipa and the 4 great continents. So he said that after he went to the 4 heavenly kings and already saw the 4 great continents, this part talks about how Ananda, his seeing is vast, because after arriving at the place of the 4 great heavenly kings, he could see everything. Just imagine if you were to stand on Mount Kailash, and on the peak of Mount Kailash, and if you were to look around, you would be able to see everything. So he saw the whole world. And then he says that this seeing completely pervades the lands of Saha world. Upon returning to the sublime abode, I only see the monastic grounds, and in the pure central hall, I only see the eaves and corridors. After he returned to the monastic ground, he can only see the central shrine hall as well as the corridors. So over here, Ananda's seeing further gets limited when he enters into the shrine hall or into this corridor and the pure central hall. The pure central hall, according to the Tibetan translation, it is the meditation room or meditation retreat room where mind can get purified. The retreat hut or meditation room. According to some commentary, it says it's a teaching hall. But in the Tibetan translation, it is a retreat room or meditation room. But according to some other commentaries, it says that it's a room of contemplation. Anyhow, that is when Ananda enters into a smaller room. I think a retreat house or retreat room term should be more appropriate. Let's see the progression of the various locations. First, he went into the monastic ground, so the large monastery, and then the large shrine hall, and then the retreat room, and then the corridors. Because through the retreat house, you can probably only see the corridor. Therefore, we see Ananda's seeing started to get more and more limited. And then Ananda started having a question, world-honored one. That is how the seeing is. At first, its substance pervaded everywhere throughout the one realm, but now in the midst of this room, it fills one room only. Does the seeing shrink from great to small? Because Ananda could see the four continents and the whole Saha world from the palace of the four heavenly kings. But now when he enters into one room, let it be the shrine hall, let it be the meditation room, he could only see what the room is. When he enters into a shrine hall, he could only see what's in the shrine hall. When he went to the four heavenly kings, even if at that time he sees everything as vast and really grand, and after he returns to the shrine hall, then he naturally would feel that my seeing is so limited, it's very small.
为父次见呢，就是塑大为小，为当强于驾宁断。
Seeing shrink from great to small, or do the walls and eaves press in and cut it off?
智障书啊，就是他智障书里面呢说是
According to the finger and palm commentary, the one we mentioned earlier, it says that right now Ananda is having some more doubts. He's considering, well, is everything shrinking? Because the world seemed to be much bigger and much vast. Is it because my seeing is shrinking? It was really vast earlier. Is it getting much smaller? Or is it because the eaves and walls press in and cut it off? To cut off my vision or my seeing of the outside, to cut off that seeing. Is it because my seeing is shrinking, or is it because the walls and eaves started to cut in, therefore my seeings are cut off? So it's very limited. This is the question of Ananda. And then he continued to say that now I do not know where the meaning of this lies, and hope the Buddha will let fall his vast compassion and proclaim it for me thoroughly. So he's saying that, oh, please, compassionate Buddha, please bestow me your compassion and thoroughly explain this teaching to me. I think Ananda's point of view is very easy to understand, because on one hand, at that time he had not attained realization, and he was a Hinayana practitioner. And as a Hinayana practitioner, they seek everything from the outside, rather than the Mahayanas seek inwardly, and the Vajrayana seeks for the secret teaching, a much deeper seeking than the inner, compared to the Mahayana, that is. So we can see that Ananda's question really represents his view of seeking something outside, because he tries to find something on the outside. When he sees the things from the four heavenly kings, he sees a lot from his eyes. But the seeing nature of mind, he still haven't really got it yet. Therefore, at that time, he feels that, is it because my seeing shrink after we got back? Because earlier my seeing was so much vaster, but now it's much more limited. Or is it because my seeing is being blocked by other materialistic things? So Ananda's question is very much reliant on his view that is seeking for something external. According to the Mahayana and Vajrayana practice, yes, our mind definitely has this luminous aspect. However, it doesn't have anything solidly existent. It is not of any form or color or shape. The nature of mind is similar to space, but still different. So if you haven't really seen the nature of mind yet, there's one thing that is really important to acknowledge still, that is, mind is not something that exists solidly. We should be aware that mind is not an external solid existence. The nature of mind in the absolute truth, it is devoid of the four extremes and the eight elaborations. In the conventional truth, it exists in a way that is just like a dream and like an illusion. Therefore, whenever you try to observe your mind, the nature of it doesn't have any true existence. This is crucial to remember. If you have not recognized that, then it's difficult to find the nature. Maybe the more you study, the more you get confused, even more so than Ananda probably, because Ananda still had the opportunity to be the attendant of Shakyamuni Buddha, and he was the last, that was his last existence. He also attained the fruition of arhathood in his lifetime. According to the Lotus Sutra and other sutras, they stated that Ananda was also an emanation monk, which means that he was not a mundane being that had the confused existence and slowly became the arhat. It's not like that. Ananda, in fact, over here asked questions for us, because majority of us, we also have some kinds of solid existence. We grasp onto a kind of a solid existence. Nowadays, many people, especially the ones that they believe in materialistic existence, whenever we talk about enlightenment, they would think that some kind of light flood in, and or some kind of roof broke and then light flood in. People nowadays grasp onto a characteristic or solid existence. And these kind of people really don't know quite well of the Mahayana Buddhism. The key is to see the nature of mind. In fact, we're not saying that the mind is truly existent. We're not saying that it is not existent either. You should not see mind as something truly existent, nor the phenomena world as truly existent. But you can't say that it is not existent either, because the existence and the non-existence, they are contradicting. Other than that, if you were to try to find a third thing, it's very difficult to find in the world. So many of you probably would feel quite afflicted and confused. But when we are studying the Mahayana teachings, there are pith instructions given by the masters. And by following those kinds of masters, then it's not difficult to find the mind at all, the nature of mind. Of course, when we look for the nature of mind through the methods that's provided in the Sutrayana teachings, we can also do that. Each of the answers given by the Buddha to Ananda, we can see that they're brilliant, because by the end of it, Ananda really couldn't elaborate on top of that anymore. This is quite wondrous. Therefore, whenever we are studying the Surangama Sutra, we should be acknowledge that the Surangama Sutra is the teaching that would lead beings to enlightenment. This is really important. Let it be reading the Sutrayana or the Zen practice or the Zen books or the Vajrayana books. It's quite important that we merge ourselves into the teaching. We have to dissolve our mind into the teaching to see the nature of our mind. We have to follow this method. And I believe a little while ago I talked about how, according to Longchenpa, there were the ones who attain enlightenment through the fragmented teachings and the ones attain enlightenment through the step-by-step teachings. And it's very difficult, as he stated, that in the modern time, it's in this modern time or in this dark age, it's difficult to attain enlightenment through the fragmented teachings. And we have to study and practice in a step-by-step fashion. This is really important to remember. Therefore, recently, I think while we're studying the Surangama Sutra, we have to read it again and again so that we can engage in the practice, and then this teaching will lead us to enlightenment. Also, I would like to advocate that it's a good time to study and practice according to the memorandum of the preliminary practices, because recently I have been proofreading my translation again, and I thought it's such a wonderful teaching with the supreme guidance from the great masters of the past. In the fall, we usually would study some Vajrayana teachings all together, and I think this year, if there's no obstacle, I really want to ask all of you to study the Entering the Way of a Great Vehicle. Also, in combination with the memorandum of preliminary practices, using 2 years or 1 year to study it. I think this is really important and a great method for us to follow the specific teachings of the methods on the actual practice. Also, I think I've given you the oral transmissions before, and in the future, how it's going to be expounded and how we're going to receive the oral transmissions, I'm still contemplating on it. But this is a suggestion for now. If you want to attain enlightenment, if you want to see the truth, then this book is indeed a wonderful book. When you're studying the Surangama Sutra or the Wish-Fulfilling Treasury or any of the other Dharma teachings, we should, first of all, free ourselves, free our mind from all kinds of afflictions of this world, and then engage in one method in practice, and then follow the step-to-step fashion to engage in this practice. This is the best and the most supreme way to engage in actual practice. Of course, I'm not forcing you to do any of those, but now we really don't have other things to do over here in Larangar. We have no worldly things to concern ourselves. Just as it is stated in the classical poem, where it says that not listening to any of the worldly affairs with the 2 ears, but to only pay attention to the noble books. Because listening to those news, such as the war in Ukraine or Russia or in England or whatever things, they don't bring much of the meaning to our lives over here. As long as we don't have war or famine or all kinds of pandemic happening over here, if we were to attain enlightenment before any of those, then we wouldn't be afraid of anything that were to happen in the external world. Of course, I'm half joking and half very genuine when I'm speaking of this, because every one of us, we're really just like Ananda. In fact, the enlightenment is not on the outside, it is from within. So if we can have some kind of preliminary practice and some kind of guidance and engage in that kind of practice, then we can transform our mind within. Otherwise, our mind would be always fettered with the 8 worldly concerns. Don't even mention about enlightenment. We probably wouldn't be able to change a little bit of our personality before our death. Then that would be really sad, because human birth is so precious. If we had never even practiced one particular practice according to the memorandum of the preliminary practices, then it would be quite a pity. I've translated this particular book back in 2007. It's been over 10 years, though I've mentioned the importance of this particular teaching for a few times in class, but this is the first time I'm talking about it from a different angle. That is, doesn't matter what kind of things we encounter in this world, we all need an inner rock to rely on. And at that time, it doesn't matter. Whenever you need a place to take refuge or rely on, at that time, it doesn't matter how much things you've studied. It is a matter of whether you can use it. After you finish studying the 5 treatises and then you study all kinds of texts, I think it would be really important to be able to carry those teachings into your real life, which is through the practice teachings, such as the memorandum of preliminary practices. At the beginning, there are extensive teachings on the guidance of the practice of precious human birth and the life is impermanent and so on and so forth. But then in the later parts, such as the merit of liberation and relying on a spiritual teacher, those are rather quite short. The key point on the later part is on taking refuge and generation of bodhicitta, also the accumulation and purification and confession. There are lots of teachings as well. All the practices, the instructions are described in great detail, such as how to visualize and how to practice, what to do. Those are all described in great detail. The only thing missing, I would say, are probably some of the chantings that's missing. So maybe later I would add them into the book as well. Somehow I got sidetracked from the Surangama Sutra to the memorandum of preliminary practice. But sometimes it could be important for me to remind you of putting your effort onto the practice. In the after-class presentation, sometimes I notice there are people who understand how to place their attention onto training the mind, and there are people who kept on thinking with their conceptual mind. Anyhow, Ananda just asked, well, what am I supposed to do? I really don't know if it's the seeing of, if it's my seeing nature has been obstructed. Could you please elaborate more? And then the Buddha told Ananda, saying that all aspects of everything in the world, such as big and small, inside and out, are classed as the dust before you. You should not say the seeing stretches and shrinks. So all the dualistic things in this world, big or small, inside and outside, they're simply the dust in front of you, the adventitious things. Therefore, you should not say that there are stretches and shrinks. The dust before you, they're simply something that is conceptually
就是万事万物也好，或者是分别念也好，一切的这个大小都
all the
互相
phenomena
贯带的，互相架理的，就是没有
or
一
the
个
conceptual
世界
mind
的这
that
个
we
内
have,
和
all
外
the
和
big
这
and
个大
small,
和
all
小，
the
就是没有这样的，都
dualism,
是我们的这个
they're
虔诚，
simply
就是也就是
taking
说
one
是
as
外境的现
reference.
象就是藏文当中这些有些
There
翻译成那
is
个外境的
no
一种这个现象，
intrinsically
就是宿世，就
existence
是现象，
inside
而
or
不应该说呢
outside
就
or
是
big
自
or
己的
small.
见
There's
呢
no
就是它有
solidly
那个宿
existent
占，就是自己
characteristics
的
as
见呢，就
such.
是现在
Rather,
就
those
缩
are
小了，就是
just
不应该
the dust
不应该
before
就是怎
the
么
sentient
讲，
beings.
就是不应该这么讲，就是所以呢，它这里的
So
话
over
呢，就是
here,
全
what
部
it
是
says
我
is
们的
that
这个心就是
everything
就是有关系的，就是这
everything
个外
is
面的一切现
correlated
象
to
的
our
话呢，就
mind.
是其实心的一种
Everything
这个
that
现象，心的一种
appears in
架
the
理，
outside,
心的
they're
一种
simply
这
the
个分别
manifestation
念，
of
分别
mind.
就是现象
They're
而已。
simply imputation of
宗经论
mind.
当中也说这个凡夫人心呢，
According
就于诸
to
法
the
中
mind mirror,
随
it
意
also
作
says
大
that
小，
therefore the
如是人
mundane
即
being's
时呢，这个
mind
心就是缩小。 然后
extend
这个
into
安逸富乐时呢，
big
这个心
or
则扩
contract
大，
into
就是这个
small
我觉得
in
还
various
是这个很好的，
situations.
因为我们
Just
凡
as
夫人的
when
话呢，
people get
实际上是在这个
rushed,
法当中，
hurried, or
随
in
着自
pressure,
己
then
的
their mind
这
would
种
get
意了的话
much
呢，就是
smaller,
可能
and when
会
they're comfortable, then
发
their
现
mind
就是
would
大的啊、小
naturally
的啊，
extend
就
to
有
be
很多
bigger.
事
I
情
think
啊，
this
就
is
包括
quite
你发
a
生一
good
件事情的话
description
呢，就是
because
你如果
as
心就是
mundane
比较
beings,
狭
we
隘的人
indeed
呢，
do that.
哇，觉得是天大的事情啊，就
Whenever
是这样的。如
things
果心比较广大的话呢，即便是天大的事情，
follow
对他来讲
whenever
呢，
things
就是
happen
真的
and
是
we
这个如
grasp
入不空的。
onto
所以这
certain
个呢，就像
changes,
是一个
then
人
you
呢
feel
心
that
特别
it's
特
a
别
big
急的时候
problem.
呢，那就是你的心呢，就是特别就是小啊，就是特别
But
小，就
for
是比
a
如说
person who
这个
has a
心
big
很狭
heart,
窄啊，就是马上
then
哭啊，
even
马
if
上闹
a
啊，就是
biggest
各种各样
problem
的
were
心
to
悸，就
happen
是
to that
如果
person, that
你
person would
心就
not
是比较这
move
个
at
缓慢，
all.
或者说是你快乐
If your
富裕，
mind
就是
is
在
very
这个
much
时候呢，就是
rushed,
人们都觉
then
得
your
啊，
mind
这个
would
心
get
很
very
广大的，
narrow.
其实我们这个
If
凡夫人真的是
if your
很
mind
可
is
怕的，
narrow,
就
then
是
you
心
would
悸的时候
react
呢，就
to
什么事都就
situation
是
right
可以
away.
用出来。心就是比较放松的时
But
候
when
的
your
话呢，
mind
就
is
是那
rather very
就是外面的这
relaxed,
个事也没有什么事。
then
因
at
此，这
that
个
time,
凡夫
even
人
if
呢，就是
things
有
were
这
to
个
happen in this
差别，就
world,
是佛陀
then
呢，
that's not
他这
going
里
to
也
make
讲。
much of a difference to you
其实外
still.
面的这个世界的大小的话呢，就是都是这个分别
The
人家里
world's
的，你不
big
应该
or
说是我
small,
的
they're
这个
simply
见有大小，就
imputation
是
of
见有
dualistic
速战，见
mind.
有这个就各种变化，就不
So
能
you
不能这
shouldn't
么
say
说。
that there
为什么
are
不能说呢？就是为了
there
便于
are
这样的理
stretches
解
and
的话呢，
shrinks
就是
of
佛
your
陀下面就
seeing,
是这样一
the
个比
Buddha
喻，就是
then
譬
said
如
in
啊，
such
就
a
是
way. And
放
then the
弃
Buddha,
中间放
to
空，就是他
further
这里讲一
elaborate
个
the
比喻，
teaching
比如说
to
是有一个
Ananda,
四
then
方
he
性
gave
的这
an
个器皿呢，
example.
就
He
是
said
四
that
方性的这个
consider
器
the
皿，就比如
example
我
of a
们盒
square
子啊、
container
箱子
in
啊，
which a
或者说是
square
一个
of
四
emptiness
方
is
性的
seen.
小房子啊。那这样的时候，你发现就是里
I
面的
ask you
这个
further,
虚空的话呢，就是也
is
是
the
四方性
square
的，因为你外面的这
emptiness
个气呢
that is
就已
seen
经
in the
固定了，
square
固定了的
container
话呢，
a
那里面的
fixed
这个
square
空间
shape,
呢，肯定是
or
四方
is it
性的。
not fixed
那这
as a
样的话，
square
我
shape?
问阿难尼，就是我啊，就是我
The
啊，
Buddha
复
said
问
that,
如
well,
此方
now
气
in
中
this square container
所
or
见
house,
放空，为复定放呢，还是为不定放？就是他下面就是问他，就是
in
这个
this square
四方
house,
性的这个器皿当中
now
的
you
话呢，
notice
那
how the
就是
space
见到
in
的
this
这个
square
四方
house
性
or
的是
square
不是这
container
个
is also
就是虚空
squared.
就是四方性的虚空，这个是阿难也是承认的，就是对方
Ananda
也是承认的
already
确实是
acknowledged
这样
that.
我们现在也是可
So
能
now we
知
are
道是
in
在
a,
这个地方有
for
一个四
example,
方
a
性的
squared
盒子的
room.
话呢，那里面的这个空呢肯定是四方性的，就是这个是我
Then
们
the
大
space
家都是应
inside
该
the
是可以
squared
共
room
同
is
这个
also
承认。
squared, right?
那这样的话呢，
It's
就是
very much
就
based
有
on
一个
its,
疑问，或者
the
是有
shape
问
of
题，
its
就是
container.
问你，
So the
那
Buddha
这
said
里面
that,
的这
now
个
let me
四
ask you
方
a
性的这种
question.
虚空呢，
Inside
就是
this
为复定
square-shaped
放，那就是说
space,
它确定是一
is
个
it
四
a
方，就里面
fixed
的这个空
square
的话呢，
shape,
就是那
or
确定
is
是
it
一个
not
四
a
方性的
fixed
吗？还是
square
是
shape?
这个为不定放， 这个里面虽然有这样的空，
Is
但
this
是这个
shape
空呢
of
不确
space
定的
fixed or
这个
not?
一个这个四方性的就只有两个回答嘛，就是要么
There are
说是
only
你
two
说这个里
possibilities,
面的这
right?
个空是确定性的
If you
四方
feel that
然后要么说是
the
不确
square
定的一
is
个
fixed
方就四方的这个空
or
就
not
这样认为
fixed.
的。那如果对方呢就是
The
说是
Buddha over
地方
here
在
then
就如果
continued
对方
to
就是
say
回
that
答
if
说
it is a
里面的
fixed
这
square
个
shape,
这个
so
情境当中的
if
这个空的
your
话呢，就是
answer
肯定
is
是
that
决定
yes,
是四方
it
性
is
决定四
a
方性的话呢
squared
那就是
shaped
被按
space
缘起呢
and
就
it
是
is fixed.
同影不
If you
圆
were
的
to say
那
that,
如果这
then the
个
Buddha
四方
said that
形里面就是
when
你
it
再
is
放一个什
switched
么这
to
个
a
塔
round
呀或者是再
container,
放一个什么圆
the
形的东西的
empty,
话呢
the
那是不
emptiness,
是
the
里面的
space
这
would
个
not be
这
round.
个空呢又变成了圆形
Because at that time, because you first agreed that the space would be a fixed square, then if I were to switch it to a sphere or a cylindrical cup into this space, then does the shape of space change? This is very similar to the Buddhist logic debates that we have nowadays. First of all, you ask the other person a question: is the space of a fixed square shape? If you were to say yes, then let's continue to debate for the various answers that you may have. For those of you who studied the ornament of Madhyamika, you will understand why a fixed square shape can't be a round space shape. Because if you were to say that it is of a fixed shape, then you cannot change it to say that the emptiness can, or the space can then change to a circle shape. Because once you agree that this is a fixed shape, you cannot say that it can change. Whenever you acknowledge that this is the characteristic or this is the fixed shape, you cannot switch. You cannot say that it can change its nature into a round or into a triangular shape anymore. In that way, you're simply saying that it doesn't have its own nature. And then the Buddha continued to ask, if it is not a fixed shape, then when it is in a square container, it should not be a square-shaped emptiness. So that space within that square-shaped container is not a square-shaped space. It is not of a fixed shape. If it's not fixed, then you shouldn't say that it's fixed. So the emptiness or the space points to our mind. It is a simile to our mind. And then the square shape of the external square shape, let it be a square triangle or a big container or a round container, those are simply of the external phenomena. Our mind has been trapped by the external phenomena, sometimes big and sometimes small. Sometimes we probably also feel exactly the same way as Ananda. Our mind, in fact, can get so conditioned by the external phenomena. For example, whenever we're trapped in a small room, then we feel that our mind also feels quite trapped. And whenever we go to the peak of the mountain, then we feel that our mind gets extended and get opened up. In fact, the mind does not have anything that is truly existent, just like space. However, whenever mind attaches to whatever is in the external phenomena, then the mind will get obscured. So Ananda couldn't really understand that. Therefore, the Buddha expounded this teaching with the example to eradicate Ananda's confusion. The Buddha then said that you say you do not know where the meaning lies. The nature of the meaning is thus. How can you speak of its location? Earlier, you said that you saw the vastness at the palace of the four great heavenly kings, and then when you enter into your small room, then the space becomes much smaller. The Buddha over here says that the sea nature doesn't have big or small. The sea nature doesn't have shrink or stretched. It doesn't have up or down, doesn't have good or bad, beautiful or ugly. So what other meanings are there to the mind? What other things that you don't see? What else that you could not see about the mind? This is the teaching on the mind. And then to further elaborate, the Buddha said, Ananda, if you now wished there to be neither squareness or roundness, you would only need to take the container away. The substance of emptiness has no shape, and so you should not say that you would also have to take the shape away from the emptiness. Over here, the Buddha said that if you really want to attain this vast and boundless realization, then you have to let go of the container. You have to put the container away. In this way, then there is no square or roundness to the space. As emptiness doesn't have any squareness or roundness. And so you should not say that you would also have to take the shape away from the emptiness. You shouldn't say that, I not only want to take away the container, I want to take away the shape of the space. That is not necessary. As what fetters us is not space. It is the object. It is the grasping to that object. So if we can eradicate that grasping, then we will be able to unfetter from holding on to an existent character. Therefore, Master Hanshan said that since our mind has been fettered by the roots and our body, if we can then break through the inside and outside, then the true mind does not have big or small. According to the 400 verses of Madhyamika, it says that as long as we do not hold on to any objects, then the samsara would naturally be eliminated. Whatever we see on the outside as an object, it could be mountains and rivers, the scenery, or our own body. At the time of attaining selflessness, then the seeds of samsara would naturally be eradicated. If, as you asked, the Buddha continued to say, your seeing shrinks and becomes small when you enter a room. Then, when you look up at the sun, is your seeing pulled out until it reaches the sun's surface? Now the next part, or this part, is a pith instruction given by the Buddha to him. He's saying that, well, since you think that when you entered into your meditation room, then your seeing shrinks, in that way you should open up your window in your shrine room and look into the space, look at the sun. The space is so big, it's so vast, the sun is so vast. Then you would resolve this problem of feeling that your seeing is shrinking. Just look at the sun, then the shrinking seeing will be expanded. And the Buddha continued to say, if you build walls and eaves which can press in and cut off your seeing, why then is there no evidence of a joining when you drill a small hole? Therefore, that idea is incorrect. Over here, the Buddha said that, well, if you feel that the eaves and the walls are breaking your seeing, then in that way, just drill a hole. Then your seeing can be connected, isn't it? So your problem will be resolved. But since it doesn't, therefore that idea is incorrect. Master Hanshan over here said that we shouldn't seek for a true mind in the object. The only thing that we need to do is to eliminate so that we can see the true mind. Which means that if we want to attain enlightenment, if we try to see something that is luminous, if we try to seek for something that is luminous, then it's very difficult to attain true enlightenment. But if we were to eliminate our grasping, our attachment to something that is solidly existent in the object, then naturally we will attain the nature of our mind. So if we were to seek the nature of mind in the object, we will not be able to find it at all. And then the Buddha continued to say, he said that from the beginningless time until now, all living beings have mistaken themselves for things, and having lost the original mind, are turned around by things. The sentient beings in the three realms had been obscured by the afflictions derived from ignorance. And under the drive of karma, they mistaken themselves as things. In this way, they lost their true mind, not be able to see the nature of their true mind. Rather, they are enslaved by the objects, by the things. So they are under the control of the phenomena. There's a great example demonstrated in an old saying. It is said that just like a prince who's living the life as a peasant because he doesn't know he's a prince. I think this is such a vivid example. From beginningless time, according to Sutrayana and Vajrayana, we have this luminous nature. Especially according to Vajrayana teachings, the Samadabhadra Tathagata, he is already enlightened. If he's not enlightened, then he will not be able to give the teachings to sentient beings. It is because he is enlightened, therefore he guides the sentient beings. But the sentient beings lost this way. Then the Buddha continues to say that that is why the sentient beings contemplate bigness and smallness in the midst of all this. The sentient beings, out of confusion, have all kinds of changes of mind. Maybe happy today, and in a few minutes one will feel that they're suffering gravely, and then the next moment they feel that the world is vast, and then later feel the world is so small that they cannot stay in this world anymore. So there's waves of this mindset. That is because we've been enslaved by objects, by the phenomena. If you can turn things around, then you are the same as the thus come one. This one is really well known. If we can turn things around, if instead of being turned by things, if we can turn things around and not being turned by things in that way, we're just the same as the thus come one. Our body and mind will be perfect and bright, and you're in an unmoving place of the way. So over here it means the immovable mandala. According to the Platform Sutra, it says that when the mind is confused, one would be turned by the illusory manifestation. When one is illuminated, or one attains enlightenment, then they will be able to turn the manifested illusion. There's this well-known teaching. When we're studying the Platform Sutra, you would know this particular master whose name is Master Chuanden. In fact, this Master Chuanden, he also is quite prolific in the study of Lotus Sutra and the Surangama Sutra. He later studied from a Zen master, Master Baisong. There was this once, Master Chuanden asked a question saying that, what does it mean by the great samadhi in the Surangama Sutra? Because Surangama Sutra kept on repeating the great samadhi. And then at that time, Master Baisong stared at him, and because of that causant auspicious condition, he right away attained realization. Later on, he went to Gaomi Monastery and then propagated the Dharma teaching, as well as composed 4 commentaries on the Surangama Sutra. At the age of 72, he held the Lotus Sutra, and chanting just the 5 letters of the title, he then enters into parinirvana. He was such a great master. So if we can do this, not being turned by the illusory manifestation, then at that time our body and mind will be perfect and bright. Master Oyi explained the body as the pure Dharmakaya. Mind is also pure. He explained it in such a way. In the way of the mind is just as a manifestation. In Tibetan, we also say that if we can turn the things, then we're just like the Das Come One. Our body and mind will be perfectly abiding in the primordial purity and primordial luminosity, and we will be abiding in this immovable mandala of the Tathagata. This is such a wonderful teaching given over here. I really hope that you can remember this. And then the Buddha said that the tip of a single fine hair can completely contain the lands of the 10 directions. Even the worlds of the 10 directions can be contained on that tip of the fine hair, which is the realization or state of realization that is described in the Lotus Sutra. Now we've completed the 7th, which is the seeing is not obstructed. So let's stop here today.